So we want to find the equation of what's graphed here, and as we're given this, it looks like we want to find it in terms of a sine function. So when we're looking at a graph and trying to figure out what function got graphed, the first thing I want to do is figure out where the baseline is. And there's a line where this function is oscillating about. So you want to find the middle of this function. Essentially, it's going to be right here. This is the baseline, because from there I go up 1, 2, 3, 4, or I go down 1, 2, 3, 4. So it oscillates around that line that I just drew, and the amplitude is 4. Well, that line we just drew is at y equal 1, so it's up 1. So the first thing I know is I know b. b equals 1. And I also know a, because the amplitude oscillates above and below by 4. So we've got 4 sine, and then we need to figure out the omega and the phi, and then plus b, because that makes things shifted up 1. Okay, the omega is determined by the period, so the next thing I'm going to do is determine the period. So I'm going to pick a point on the graph, usually a max or a min, where I can read easily what the value is there. I think I'll choose this one. So that's pi fourths. And then I go till it repeats itself, and there it repeats itself at 3 pi fourths. So then I figure out how far apart these are, and that is the period. Well, 3 pi fourths minus pi fourths is 2 pi fourths, or pi over 2. So the period, I'm going to put that over here, the period is pi over 2. I got that from just seeing how far apart those were. And so now we know that if we take 2 pi and divide it by omega, that equals the period. So that equals pi over 2. So now we need to figure out what omega is. Sometimes you can just look at it and see what it would need to be, or we can solve it for omega. I can see here if omega was a 4, then I'd have 2 pi over 4, which reduces to pi over 2. So omega is going to be a 4. So I'm going to put a 4 in front of the x. I still need to figure out the phase angle. If you didn't see that and you solved here, you'd multiply both sides by omega so that it cancels here. And then you would times both sides by 2, and then you would divide both sides by pi. So omega is 4. Now we're going to figure out what phi, the phase angle, is by looking for the phase shift. This is a sine graph, and normally the sine graph at 0 or at the baseline is 0. But this is moved over and it crosses the baseline right there, and that looks like that's over by pi eighths. So it is shifted to the right by pi eighths. And so now I'm going to take the phase shift, which is found by taking the stuff in the parentheses, omega x plus phi equal to 0, and solving that for x. If I solve that for x, I have minus phi over omega, and that equals the phase shift, and we just saw that the phase shift was pi over 8. Now I know omega, I just found it, and it was 4, so I'm going to put that in. So I have negative phi over 4 equals pi over 8. Let's go ahead and solve that for phi. So I'm going to times both sides by a negative, so that'll get rid of it and put it over here. And then I'm also going to multiply both sides by a 4, so that this 4 will cancel, and that'll put a 4 over here, and there's a negative out in front of it. So it looks like phi equals negative 4 pi eighths, which reduces down to negative pi over 2. So I'm going to put phi in here, negative pi over 2. And that is the equation that we have graphed.